Do you think the most painful corporate betrayal is someone stealing your hard work? I used to think so, but the truly ruthless betrayal is when your boss, wearing a tailored suit, smiles and pushes you toward a gallows he built to cover his own corruption. The men who dig these graves always forget one simple rule. They never realize they are handing the shovel to the exact person who knows every hidden corner of the system. Welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories, and thank you so much for your continuous support. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep producing the content you love. If you enjoy today's story, please consider joining our Patreon community, where you can listen to exclusive, fully detailed true stories that are too intense for YouTube, featuring extended runtimes and a full cast of emotional voice actors. You can join by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment below. Now, let us dive into today's story. My name is Stella Parker. The air conditioning inside the headquarters of Omnicore Therapeutics always felt like a subtle reminder that you were just a cog in a sterile, temperature-controlled machine. Located right in the beating heart of downtown Chicago, Omnicore was a medical tech giant that prided itself on cutting-edge innovation and flawless data management. I am 32 years old, working as a data systems architect. For 4 grueling years, I practically lived in this glass and steel fortress. I built our secure infrastructure from the ground up. I skipped holidays, canceled dates, and fueled my body with stale coffee and pure ambition just to ensure our system remained impenetrable. The Director of Data Infrastructure position was opening up, and everyone, including myself, knew it had my name written all over it. My performance reviews were flawless. My system architecture was award-winning, and I had bled for this company, or so I thought. The crushing reality of corporate America hit me during the third quarter all-hands meeting. The executive boardroom was packed with senior management. Julian Vance, our vice president, stood at the head of the massive mahogany table, flashing a rehearsed, blindingly white smile. When he announced the new director, the air left my lungs. My heart stopped. It was not me. The promotion, the massive salary bump, the validation of my 4 years of relentless grinding were handed over on a silver platter to Braden Cole. Braden was the absolute embodiment of nepotism and empty charisma. He was a guy who probably peaked in a college fraternity and never bothered to develop actual professional skills. He walked into the boardroom wearing a tailored navy suit, paired with ridiculous leather loafers and absolutely no socks. His hair was perfectly styled, and he carried an aura of unearned confidence that made my stomach turn. When he took the floor to introduce himself to the department, he did not talk about data pipelines, server architecture, or security protocols. Instead, he threw around meaningless corporate buzzwords, emphasizing how he planned to bring out-of-the-box thinking and dynamic synergy to our division. He was completely clueless. He did not know the difference between a secure firewall and a basic router, yet he was now my direct supervisor. Immediately after the meeting adjourned and the room cleared out, Julian caught my eye. He signaled for me to follow him into his glass-walled office. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing us inside a soundproof bubble of hypocrisy. Julian leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms and putting on this patronizing, fake empathetic expression. He spoke with the smooth, overproduced cadence of a cheap self-help podcaster trying to sell you a worthless course. "Stella, I know this might feel like a setback," Julian began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, "but you have to look at the bigger picture. Omnicore is pivoting. We need Braden and his reckless energy to disrupt the market. He is the face of the new direction we are heading in. But you, Stella, you are the backbone. You are the solid stepping stone this entire team relies on. We could never risk losing your vital technical expertise to mere administrative duties. You are far too important right where you are." A stepping stone. That was exactly how the vice president of the company saw me. Someone to be walked all over, stepped on, and pressed into the dirt so a guy in sockless loafers could reach the top. The anger inside me flared hot and toxic, threatening to boil over into a screaming match. But I did not scream. I did not flip his desk, and I did not throw my employee badge at his face. I simply smiled, a perfectly calculated, polite smile, and nodded my head gently. I forced the bitter pill of reality down my throat. I knew exactly how the brutal game of American corporate politics worked. You never raise your voice, you never show your tears, and you absolutely never fight back when you do not hold the winning cards. I thanked him for his valuable insight and walked out of the glass office, my mind already shifting gears from despair to cold, calculating survival. It did not take long for Braden to prove just how dangerous his ignorance really was. During his very first week in the director chair, he decided he needed total, unchecked control over everything in the department to assert his dominance. He submitted a formal request for super administrator access to our internal data server systems. In the world of medical tech, handing over super admin privileges to someone without a background in cybersecurity is the equivalent of giving a toddler a loaded handgun. It was a massive violation of basic compliance protocols and federal data regulations. I immediately flagged the request in the system, citing strict security policies and the catastrophic potential risks to highly sensitive patient data. But my professional warnings meant absolutely nothing to the men playing executive games. Within 2 hours of my denial, Julian bypassed the standard approval queue entirely. He personally fast-tracked Braden's request, overriding my security flag and granting the golden keys of our entire data infrastructure to a man who barely knew how to log into the email system without calling technical support. They were bending the rules, breaking the secure system I built, and arrogantly assuming there would be no consequences for their actions. With the keys to the kingdom secured in his back pocket, Braden wasted absolutely no time proving my worst fears right. He needed a quick win to validate his promotion to the board of directors. Something flashy to justify the reckless energy Julian had promised. Real architectural improvements take months of rigorous testing, but Braden was not interested in building. He was interested in the illusion of hypergrowth. Utilizing his newly granted administrative privileges, he bypassed our internal vetting protocols entirely and quietly integrated a third-party application programming interface directly into our core data pipeline. This unauthorized tool was designed to aggressively scrape external medical databases and cross-reference them with our proprietary patient records, artificially inflating our data processing metrics to make his department look incredibly productive. The problem was that this specific piece of software was completely unlicensed, notoriously unsecure, and strictly prohibited by our corporate compliance standards. It was a digital parasite feeding directly on the highly sensitive server network I had spent years locking down. Exactly 14 days later, the inevitable disaster struck. I was sitting at my workstation late on a Tuesday afternoon, running routine diagnostic checks on the network bandwidth, when my primary monitor abruptly flashed a critical system error. It was not a standard glitch or a routine timeout warning. It was a catastrophic red alert overriding my entire screen. The automated defense systems from our enterprise cloud service provider had detected a massive, unauthorized data hemorrhage originating from our internal servers. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, tracing the digital bleeding back to the source. It was Braden's rogue tool. But the nightmare did not stop there. The cloud provider immediately triggered a severe compliance breach protocol. Within minutes, an automated legal notice landed in my administrative inbox. It detailed flagrant copyright violations for utilizing unlicensed scraping software on their proprietary servers, along with a terrifying warning regarding potential mass exposure of confidential health information. The preliminary penalty assessment attached to the automated notice was enough to make my blood run completely cold. It was a staggering fine of $2 million. $2 million, hanging over our heads, accumulating risk with every single second the unauthorized connection remained active. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford in data security. I immediately isolated the infected network segment to slow the data bleed and opened a new email thread flagged with the highest possible priority. I drafted a sharp, unambiguous emergency report addressed directly to Julian and Braden. I attached comprehensive technical diagnostics, the cloud provider's penalty notice, and a highly detailed legal risk analysis. I explicitly stated that we were facing severe federal compliance violations and an immediate $2 million financial liability if they did not authorize me to forcefully sever the rogue connection right that instant. I hit send and watched the delivery receipts confirm they had both received it. I sat back, expecting the office doors to fly open in a state of absolute corporate panic. Instead, absolute silence echoed from the executive suite. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No replies came through the server. Unable to wait any longer while the company bled data, I grabbed my tablet and marched toward the executive wing. Before I could even reach the glass doors, Julian stepped out of the shadows near the executive washroom and physically blocked my path. His face was devoid of the fake podcaster charm he usually wore. He grabbed my elbow, his grip painfully tight, and pulled me into the secluded alcove next to the emergency stairwell. He leaned in close, checking over his shoulder to ensure the corridor was empty, and lowered his voice to a harsh, commanding whisper. "You are going to go back to your desk, Stella, and you are going to permanently delete that email you just sent," Julian ordered, his eyes locked onto mine with a cold, terrifying intensity. "You are going to wipe the warning notifications from your dashboard, and you are going to purge the diagnostic reports from the local server. Braden is handling this incident completely off the books. Do not, under any circumstances, escalate this matter to the legal department. Am I making myself perfectly clear?" He released my arm and walked away without waiting for an answer, leaving me standing alone in the dim light of the hallway. The sheer audacity of his command sent a chilling realization crashing over me. They were not just trying to quietly fix a mistake. They were orchestrating a massive $2 million cover-up, and Julian had just explicitly ordered me to destroy the evidence. Every single instinct I had honed over my career screamed that I was being lured into a deadly trap. In the corporate world, when a superior tells you to hide a disaster off the books, they are not protecting you. They are fitting you for a fall. I walked back to my desk, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, but my mind was crystal clear. I did not delete a single file. Instead, I opened a heavily encrypted command terminal that operated below the standard monitoring software, operating with the swift, precise keystrokes of a phantom. I systematically extracted every single server log, the firewall breach records, the cloud provider's penalty notice, and the original time-stamped email I had sent to them. I compacted the raw data into an impenetrable encrypted archive and silently transferred the entire package onto a highly secure physical flash drive. I slipped the drive into the secret bottom lining of my leather handbag. Julian wanted me to play along and dig my own grave. He had no idea I had just secured the only weapon capable of burning his entire career to the ground. The silence that followed that hallway encounter was not peaceful. It was the suffocating, heavy silence that precedes a targeted corporate execution. The Cold War had officially begun, and Julian Vance was a master of psychological siege warfare. His campaign to isolate me was brilliantly subtle, executed with the ruthless precision of a seasoned sociopath. It started with the daily calendar, the bi-weekly infrastructure strategy sessions, the very meetings I had chaired and organized for the last 3 years, suddenly vanished entirely from my schedule. When I formally inquired about the missing invitations, an automated administrative note simply stated the attendee list had been highly optimized for executive efficiency. Then came the digital barricades. On a Thursday morning, I attempted to pull the routine quarterly resource allocation logs from the shared financial drives to run my standard diagnostics, instead of the familiar spreadsheet populating my screen. A harsh red banner slapped across my monitor, screaming access denied. I immediately called the internal IT help desk, only to be informed by a very nervous, stuttering junior technician that my permissions had been revoked entirely. The official reason listed in the system was a comprehensive departmental security restructuring initiated directly by the vice president himself. I was being systematically blinded and deafened, boxed into a dark digital corner, while they moved their deadly pieces in the shadows. While Julian cut off my vision and stripped away my resources, Braden was tasked with weaving the actual noose. My inbox began to slowly fill with highly unusual, aggressively casual emails from my new director. He was clearly trying to manufacture a damning paper trail, but he lacked the basic intellect to make it look even remotely natural. The messages were clumsy, transparent attempts at complete entrapment. "Hey Stella," one particularly pathetic email read. "Just circling back on that third-party interface you pushed so hard for us to install last month. Can you confirm the final integration steps you took on your end?" Another arrived exactly 2 days later, asking me to verify the operational capacity of the new data scraping protocols you highly recommended during our departmental transition phase. It was laughable, but in a corporate tribunal, a manufactured paper trail is just as deadly as a legitimate one. They desperately wanted me to reply with blinding anger, to deny it aggressively, or to slip up and acknowledge the tool's existence in a way that their legal team could twist into a full confession. I absolutely refused to give them a single usable syllable. I played their agonizing game of cat and mouse with the cold, calculated detachment of a bomb disposal expert. My replies were absolute masterpieces of corporate non-speak. I used perfectly sanitized phrases like, "message received and noted for the record," or simply stated that all approved infrastructure changes are documented strictly within the centralized change management portal as per standard operating procedure. I offered them nothing but neutral, frictionless surfaces they could not possibly grip. I knew that silence or pure neutrality was the ultimate weapon against an interrogator desperate for a reaction. But playing passive defense was never my style. While I fed Braden harmless, sterile platitudes, I was quietly turning my own workstation into a highly sensitive, invisible surveillance hub. If they were accessing my profile, analyzing my logs, or building a legal case against me, I needed to know exactly what they were looking at, and when they were looking at it. I spent 4 hours writing a bespoke reverse tracking script. It was a tiny, incredibly stealthy piece of code designed to latch onto my own internal employee identification number. I buried it deep within the encrypted registry files of my user account. It was not designed to block anyone or raise any firewall alarms. It was strictly designed to watch the watchers. Anytime a superior administrator queried my name, accessed my archived files, or interacted with my digital footprint in any capacity, the script would silently capture their activity, log their network location, and ping a secure, encrypted terminal I had hidden on a secondary partition of my hard drive. For 3 agonizing days, the tracker caught absolutely nothing but routine automated system maintenance pings. Then, late on a Friday evening, while the rest of the office was emptying out for the weekend, my hidden terminal lit up like a distress beacon. The alerts were coming in rapid succession, streaming down my secondary monitor in bright green text. They were all originating from the exact secure IP address assigned to Julian Vance's corner office. He was not just casually browsing my files. He was actively utilizing a high-level administrative override to access the company's secure legal document signing portal. My heart beat a slow, heavy, rhythmic drum in my chest as I ran a real-time decryption diagnostic on the data packets my tracker was intercepting, the horrifying truth decoded across my screen, line by terrifying line, revealing a conspiracy far more brazen and criminal than I had ever imagined. Julian was not just hiding the massive data breach from the executives. He was meticulously crafting a highly detailed, utterly fabricated official incident report. The document completely exonerated Braden from all wrongdoing, outlining a wild, fictional narrative where a rogue data systems architect had bypassed all managerial oversight to install malicious, unauthorized software for personal gain. But the truly chilling part, the detail that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, was the final page of the document. Using his supreme executive override, Julian was actively bypassing the standard 2-factor authentication on my employee profile. He was digitally stealing my secure employee signature. I watched in real time as the system confirmed he was stamping my forged name at the bottom of his fictional confession, preparing to serve my head on a silver platter directly to the board of directors to answer for the $2 million penalty. Any normal person would have panicked in that exact moment. They would have printed the screen, sprinted down the long hallway, kicked in the vice president's glass door, and started screaming bloody murder, demanding HR intervention. I did not do any of that. I simply sat back in my ergonomic chair and took a very deep, steadying breath. I locked my workstation, walked out of the icy, sterile building, and headed straight to the boutique cafe across the street. I ordered a double-shot espresso, paid with exact change, and sat by the window watching the towering corporate headquarters loom against the gray Chicago sky. A genuine, warm smile spread across my face as the bitter, dark coffee coated my tongue. I was not afraid. I was relishing the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of Julian Vance. He honestly thought he was a brilliant director setting the perfect stage for a tragedy. He had absolutely no idea he was just a clumsy puppet, and I was going to rewrite his entire script. The official calendar invite arrived precisely 3 days before the highly anticipated third-quarter board meeting. This was the annual corporate summit where executive budgets were strictly evaluated, massive financial allocations were authorized, and departmental futures were permanently decided. Usually, someone operating at my level would never be permitted within 100 feet of that executive boardroom during a severe financial review. Yet, there it was, glowing ominously in my inbox. A mandatory summons originating directly from Julian Vance. The official agenda listed my role simply as a standby technical support specialist for the digital presentation. I stared at the glowing pixels of the invitation, understanding instantly and crystal clear what it truly meant. It was absolutely not a genuine request for technical assistance. It was a formal, undeniable invitation to my own public execution. He wanted me physically present in the room, standing silently and helplessly in the corner, so he could point a perfectly manicured finger directly at me while he delivered the fabricated incident report to the entire board of directors. If they honestly expected a panicked, heavily defensive employee desperately trying to save her career, I was absolutely determined to give them the exact opposite. I did not argue with the administrative assistant. I did not question the invitation through email, and I did not utter a single word of complaint to my colleagues. Instead, I carefully and meticulously cultivated the perfect illusion of absolute submission. I walked into a high-end downtown boutique and purchased the sharpest, most impeccably tailored black suit I could possibly find. It was the exact kind of suit you wear to a somber corporate funeral. For the next 3 days, I walked the sterile office halls with my head kept respectfully low, speaking only when spoken to, carrying myself like a thoroughly defeated worker completely ignorant of the heavy blade hovering right above her neck. I let Braden give me trivial, demeaning administrative tasks and accepted them with a polite, vacant nod. I transformed myself into the perfect, obedient, and highly expendable scapegoat they so desperately needed me to be. But beneath that docile exterior, my mind was functioning like a high-speed quantum processor, calculating every possible variable of the impending confrontation. I knew Julian held all the supreme executive authority, and if he realized I was actively fighting back, he could simply have the building security team physically drag me out of the lobby before I could utter a single word in my own defense. I needed an ironclad, unstoppable insurance policy. Operating from my highly secure home network in the dead of night, I constructed a sophisticated deadman switch. It was a completely automated, heavily encrypted email sequence buried deep within an external server located far outside the company firewall. This hidden digital payload contained the complete, unredacted original server logs, the actual time-stamped warning emails, and a comprehensive code breakdown of Braden deploying the illegal data scraping tool. The automated server trigger was set for exactly 11:30 in the morning on the day of the board meeting. The blind copied recipients were the chief executive officer and the chief legal officer. The absolute only way to stop that devastating email from launching was if I manually entered a randomly generated 64-character decryption key from my personal tablet before the clock struck 11:30. If Julian abruptly fired me, If the security guards locked me in a holding room, or if I simply did not make it to the meeting for any reason, the truth would detonate automatically and indiscriminately. I had the raw server data to prove my innocence, but raw data can sometimes be twisted and obscured by expensive corporate lawyers. I needed something visceral, something completely undeniable that would shatter Julian's polished facade into a million unrecoverable pieces. The universe, it seemed, possesses a beautifully dark sense of humor when it comes to punishing the exceptionally arrogant, while running a final, sweeping diagnostic check across the entire corporate network infrastructure. I stumbled upon a glaring configuration vulnerability in the building perimeter security system. The high-definition surveillance cameras pointing outward toward the street were actively capturing the outdoor patio of the upscale cocktail bar located directly across the avenue. It was the exact same bar where Julian and Braden went for their daily 2-hour executive lunches. The critical vulnerability was not just visual. The newly installed external cameras featured advanced, highly sensitive directional microphones designed specifically to capture street-level security threats and ambient disturbances. Utilizing a complex audio isolation algorithm I originally wrote back in college, I tapped directly into the archived surveillance footage from the specific evening Julian had ordered me to delete the cloud provider warning email. I sat in the dark, systematically sifting through hours of ambient street noise, blaring sirens, and heavy wind, until I finally found them, sitting comfortably on the dimly lit patio, holding expensive glasses of imported whiskey. They were completely visible and perfectly audible. I carefully extracted the high-fidelity audio file, digitally amplifying the human vocal frequencies while forcefully suppressing the background traffic noise. The clarity of the playback was absolutely terrifying. I listened through my noise-canceling headphones as Braden nervously asked what would happen if I went directly to the legal department with the evidence. I heard Julian laugh, a cold, remarkably arrogant sound, before he clearly explained his master plan. She is a naive, disposable asset. His voice echoed through the speakers. We stamp her signature on the fake incident report, serve her to the board as the mastermind, and the $2 million problem vanishes overnight. He had just willingly handed me the final, lethal nail for his own professional coffin. The morning of the third quarter board meeting arrived with a crisp, freezing chill hanging in the Chicago air. I stood in front of my lobby mirror, slowly adjusting the sharp collar of my pitch-black suit. My pulse was incredibly slow, beating with the calm, terrifying rhythm of absolute certainty. The dead man's switch was armed, silently ticking down the seconds in the background. The encrypted physical flash drive containing the raw network data and the damning audio recording was secured tightly inside the breast pocket of my jacket. All the pieces were locked precisely into their final positions. I walked into the grand executive elevator and firmly pressed the glowing button for the top floor. When the polished steel doors finally slid open, revealing the massive glass walls of the boardroom, I did not walk in like a trembling victim heading to the gallows. I stepped into that room with the silent, flawless grace of the most patient apex predator in the world. Taking my designated seat in the corner, completely ready to watch my prey enthusiastically lock their own heads into the guillotine. The atmosphere inside the executive boardroom on the top floor of the Omnicore Tower was absolutely stifling. The air was thick with the kind of oppressive, heavy tension that only exists when massive amounts of money and corporate reputations are simultaneously on the line. The massive mahogany table stretched across the center of the room, surrounded by the highest-ranking officials in the entire corporation. The chief executive officer sat motionless at the very head of the table, his expression completely unreadable, radiating a cold, intimidating authority. Flanking him were the senior members of the board of directors and the entire executive legal team, including the famously ruthless chief legal officer. I sat quietly in a small, uncomfortable leather chair pushed firmly against the far corner wall, perfectly playing the role of the invisible technical support assistant. I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap, my posture rigidly obedient, and my eyes lowered. Julian Vance stood up from his premium leather seat near the front. He slowly buttoned the jacket of his expensive charcoal suit, letting a heavy, suffocating silence fall over the room before he spoke. When he finally opened his mouth, his performance was nothing short of a theatrical masterpiece. He did not look angry or vengeful. Instead, he painted his face with the deep, agonizing sorrow of a benevolent leader who had been profoundly betrayed by someone he trusted. He took a deep, calculated breath, looking directly at the chief executive officer with perfectly manufactured regret. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Julian began, his voice lowered to a somber, steady pitch. "I ask to amend today's agenda because it is my deeply unfortunate duty to bring a catastrophic security incident to your immediate attention. We pride ourselves on our impenetrable data infrastructure. However, it deeply pains me to report that our trust has been completely violated from within our own ranks. We are currently facing a massive compliance breach, an unauthorized data extraction event that has triggered severe legal penalties from our primary cloud service providers." He paused, letting the terrifying gravity of his words sink into the minds of the executives. Then, he pressed a button on his sleek wireless remote. The massive wall-sized projection screen behind him flickered to life. Displayed in high definition for the entire room to see was the meticulously forged incident report my tracker had caught him creating days ago. The document looked incredibly official, complete with corporate watermarks, timestamps, and devastating financial figures. Julian used a laser pointer to circle the final penalty assessment at the top of the page. "Because of this reckless, completely unauthorized integration of third-party scraping software," Julian continued, his voice echoing in the silent room, "Omnicore Therapeutics has just been served with an immediate, non-negotiable fine of $2 million. Furthermore, we are facing potential federal audits regarding the exposure of highly sensitive patient medical records." A collective, audible gasp rippled through the boardroom. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces turning completely pale. The chief legal officer removed his reading glasses, his eyes narrowing into deadly slits. $2 million was not just a minor financial setback. It was a massive disaster that demanded immediate, brutal accountability. Julian had perfectly primed the explosive, and now he was ready to direct the blast. "I wish I could say—" "This was an external cyber attack," Julian said, his voice dripping with fake tragedy. "But after conducting a rigorous, exhaustive internal investigation alongside our new director, Braden Cole, we discovered the horrifying truth. This unauthorized software was intentionally installed, bypassing all managerial oversight and security protocols." Julian slowly turned his head, his cold eyes locking directly onto me in my dark corner. The laser pointer moved across the screen, highlighting the forged digital signature stamped clearly at the bottom of the fictional confession. "The sole architect of this disaster, the individual who single-handedly caused this $2 million liability in a misguided attempt to manipulate system metrics for personal glory, is our data systems architect, Stella Parker." The reaction was instantaneous. The entire room physically pivoted. Dozens of furious, judging eyes bore into me, pinning me against the wall like a convicted criminal standing before a firing squad. The silence was deafening, heavy with unadulterated corporate rage. Across the massive mahogany table, sitting safely in the shadows of the executives, Braden Cole leaned back in his chair. He slowly crossed his arms, wearing a sickening, arrogant smirk. He looked completely relaxed, absolutely convinced that his massive failure had been flawlessly scrubbed away, leaving his career spotless while I was about to be publicly slaughtered. They fully expected me to crack. They expected me to burst into hysterical tears, to stammer out pathetic denials, or to scream wildly about being framed. I gave them absolutely nothing of the sort. I did not shed a single tear, and I did not raise my voice. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the solid weight of the encrypted tablet resting in my lap. The clock in my head confirmed I was well ahead of the 11:30 deadline for my automated dead man switch. I stood up from my chair. My movements were slow, deliberate, and entirely devoid of fear. The sharp cut of my black suit made me look like an executioner rather than a victim as I calmly walked toward the front of the room. I ignored the hostile glares of the board members and walked straight past Julian, who momentarily frowned. Clearly confused by my terrifying lack of panic, I stopped at the central presentation console embedded in the mahogany table. Without asking for permission, I pulled a specialized data cable from my pocket, plugged it directly into my personal tablet, and forcefully engaged the administrative system override. A loud, sharp electronic beep echoed through the room. Julian's forged incident report instantly vanished from the massive wall projector, completely wiped away by a solid black screen. A second later, my own secure terminal interface illuminated the room. I had absolute, unyielding control of the presentation. I completely agree that there is a disastrous $2 million cover-up happening in this room today, I stated, my voice ringing out with crystal clear, unwavering authority. But the vice president has unfortunately named the wrong main character. Before Julian could even process my words, my fingers danced across the glass screen of my tablet. I did not show them a typed report or a subjective narrative. I showed them the absolute, undeniable truth of raw mathematics. The screen flashed, displaying the deeply encrypted original server logs I had extracted the very day the breach occurred. The data was raw, complex, and utterly impossible to forge. What you are looking at on the screen is the original, unedited firewall traffic log from our central servers, I explained calmly, projecting my voice so every single executive could hear me perfectly. It clearly shows the exact moment the unauthorized third-party application programming interface was aggressively injected into our secure medical network. Now, if you direct your attention to the source origin identifier, you will see it does not trace back to my workstation. I tapped the screen, highlighting a specific string of internal network routing data in bright, burning red. This specific network identifier belongs to a single, highly restricted machine within this entire building. It is the exact machine assigned to the newly appointed Director of Data Infrastructure. The illegal software that caused the $2 million fine was installed directly from the private office of Braden Cole. The boardroom erupted into chaotic murmurs. The chief executive officer leaned forward, his eyes burning holes into the projection screen. In the corner, Braden's arrogant smirk instantly dissolved, replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. He dropped his expensive pen, the loud clatter echoing sharply over the whispering executives. He looked like a man who had just stepped on a live landmine. Julian's perfectly tanned face drained of all its color, turning a sickly shade of ash gray. His polished, podcaster facade shattered completely as sheer panic set in. He frantically waved his hands, desperately trying to regain control of the narrative before the board could fully digest the raw data. "This is completely absurd," Julian stammered loudly, his voice cracking with desperation. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "This is clearly some kind of technical display error. She is a systems architect. She knows how to manipulate these visual logs to deflect the blame. Do not listen to this nonsense. She is desperately trying to save her own job." I did not let him finish his pathetic lie. I did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. With one final lethal swipe of my finger across my tablet, I closed the raw data logs and opened a high-resolution image of an internal corporate email. It was not just any email. It was the exact, time-stamped message Julian had sent me immediately after the cloud provider issued the massive penalty warning. The message was displayed in massive, undeniable letters across the entire 20-foot wall. I looked directly into Julian's terrified eyes and read his own damning words out loud to the absolutely silent room. "Stella, you are going to delete the warning notifications. Braden is handling this incident completely off the books. Do not, under any circumstances, escalate this matter to the legal department." The suffocating silence that slammed into the boardroom was absolute. It was the heavy, definitive silence of a falling guillotine blade slicing through the air. I stepped back from the console, unhooked my tablet, and let the undeniable proof of their devastating corporate treason burn brightly onto the retinas of every single executive in the room, even with the damning email glowing brightly on the massive wall. Julian Vance still tried to fight. He opened his mouth, his mind desperately scrambling to weave one final pathetic web of lies. He was likely going to claim I hacked his administrative account, that the email was a sophisticated digital fabrication, but I was absolutely not about to give him the oxygen to speak. I tapped the screen of my tablet one last time, unleashing the absolute final twist that would permanently suffocate any hope he had left. The crisp, flawlessly enhanced audio recording from the street bar flooded the completely silent boardroom. Every single executive sat completely paralyzed as Braden's nervous voice echoed through the high-definition speakers, asking what would happen if I went to the legal department. Then came Julian's chilling, arrogant reply. She is a naive, disposable asset. We stamp her signature on the fake incident report, serve her to the board as the mastermind, and the $2 million problem vanishes overnight. The audio clip finished, leaving an absolute, crushing void in its wake. The conspiracy to aggressively forge my digital signature and turn me into the ultimate sacrificial lamb was now an undeniable, publicly exposed reality. The chief executive officer slowly turned his head. His expression was no longer just authoritative, it was composed of absolute, freezing ice. He did not say a single word to Julian. He simply raised his right hand and gave a sharp, definitive nod to the head of building security standing near the heavy wooden doors. Beside the mahogany table, Braden began to tremble so violently that he knocked over his crystal water glass. It shattered loudly against the polished wood, spilling freezing water all over his tailored navy suit. He fell to his knees, frantically stammering out desperate pleas for mercy, loudly claiming he was just following orders. The chief legal officer did not even look at him. He simply raised his voice, a cold, booming sound that cut right through Braden's pathetic sobbing, completely shutting him down and firmly ordering him to remain totally silent until the federal authorities arrived. Julian was entirely broken. The sophisticated, untouchable mask he had worn for so many years shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. He stumbled backward, his legs giving out as he collapsed heavily into his chair. He stared blankly at the massive screen, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization that his prestigious, decades-long career had just completely evaporated into thin air in a mere 3 minutes. Later that exact same afternoon, I stood quietly with my arms crossed in the towering glass hallway of the executive wing. I watched with absolute satisfaction as 4 armed security guards firmly escorted Julian and Braden out of the building. They were stripped of their corporate dignity, carrying nothing but empty cardboard boxes containing a few pathetic personal items. Neither of them dared to look up. There were absolutely no goodbyes spoken. The very next morning, my computer chimed with a high-priority notification. It was a direct, personal email from the chief executive officer. He was formally offering me the monumental task of cleaning up the massive disaster they left behind. I was immediately promoted to the supreme position of Director of Systems, complete with absolute administrative authority and a massive 40% increase to my annual salary. I sat back in my ergonomic chair and smiled a soft, genuine smile. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my warm coffee. I opened the master security portal on my monitor and permanently deactivated every single electronic access card belonging to my former bosses. I looked out the massive window next to my desk. The sprawling Chicago sky had absolutely never looked so brilliantly clear and magnificent. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story today. I would absolutely love to know where in the world you are currently listening from. So please tell us in the comments. If you found today's story deeply satisfying, please help us keep the channel alive by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon community. Over there, you can listen to our absolute best, most intense exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can easily join by scanning the Patreon QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the direct link provided in the description or the pinned comment section below.